All right, we're going to do a little political analysis here today. And we have this article that's been going around where Joe Rogan says, I'd rather vote for Trump. Bernie backing Joe Rogan disses Dems for making us all look dumb over Biden. The comedian in one of the world's most popular podcasts, Joe Rogan, has said he would rather vote for Donald Trump than Joe Biden in the 2020 election, should the former vice president become the Democratic nominee. Speaking on April 3rd with guest Eric Weinstein, a mathematician, economist, and a bunch of other fake job titles, Rogan said he could not vote for Biden, adding that the Democratic Party has, quote, essentially made us all morons. So here you have the conversation, and there's some salty language, so cover your children's ears here. Let's see.
Choice at all.
Yeah.
So.
I want a choice of an actual president that's viable. I don't have one. So then you're going to ask me, well, which of the non-viable people do you like best?
Well, this is the real issue with the Democratic Party. They've essentially made us all morons.
Yeah.
With this Joe Biden thing, they really have.
Can
They've
you
made us all
imagine?
morons.
Who do we need? I mean,
I can't vote for that guy.
I can't vote for him.
I can't vote for him.
I can't vote for Trump.
I'd rather vote for Trump than him. I don't think he can handle anything. I mean, you're relying entirely on his cabinet. Like, if you want to talk about an individual leader that can communicate, he can't do that. And we don't even know what the fuck he's going to be like after a year in office. The pressure of being the president of the United States is something that no one has ever prepared for.
Right.
The only one who seems to be fine with it is Trump, oddly enough. I mean, he doesn't seem to be aging at all or in any sort of decline. You know, Obama, like, almost immediately started looking older.
Yeah.
George W. almost immediately started looking older.
I think that this is not a change in Trump. Like, Trump, in a weird way, has just always been this performative, like a fake alpha.
Right, and he still plays golf all the time. Like, he hasn't switched up much. I mean, I'm sure he switched it up a little bit because of the pandemic, because he's apparently a germaphobe, which is hilarious. But this could be his demise. You know? I mean, isn't that kind of hilarious? That might be what does him in. The guy's always been worried about germs, apparently.
How does that work with his active ex?
So, isn't that interesting? Joe Rogan saying, Biden, he can't handle anything, and it doesn't seem that way. This Weinstein seems to be a never-Trumper of some sort. I find it interesting he calls him a fake alpha. I'm pretty sure Donald Trump has no difficulty with women. I don't know what is fake about it. There was a funny phenomenon. I can only tell you what I read, but when Trump was running for office in 2016, women were reporting having romantic dreams about him all over the country. I don't think we have to worry about too many women dreaming romantically about Mr. Eric here. Eric Weinstein. So, as the Epoch Times' Catabella Roberts reports, Rogan, who previously endorsed Biden's primary rival, Bernie Sanders, went on to speak about Trump's ability to handle the pressure. Okay, we saw that. And the reason is, I think Donald Trump was already running in his own empire. I mean, a business empire, a real estate empire. But as we looked at with analyzing the wealth of Carlos Maza, $11 billion would make you one of the richest, or it would make you richer than the bottom third of entire countries in the world. So in one sense, at least measured by GDP, so in one sense, it's like Donald Trump has already been managing a country worth of wealth of fairly substantial size. He's upgraded. He's upgraded to the biggest country. It was a promotion. But he's the only one. Obama was a community organizer. I can't remember much about George W. I'd like to forget him. But Trump is probably the only one that is adequately prepared for the job. And it's funny, at the very beginning, he says, I don't have a choice of a real president. I don't have a choice. And it's like, well, we have a choice. We have a guy with now 4-year-long track record. of doing a pretty good job, doing what he said he was going to do, and also dealing with this crisis in a way that the American people have generally approved. Speaking of Biden, Rogan also noted the former vice president can barely talk and forgets what he was saying halfway in the conversation. I don't know about you, but I'm going to record these debates and watch them over and over again. It's going to be my favorite comedic situational comedies of all time. Describing the former vice president's speech as not a normal way to communicate unless he's high, Rogan also points out that Biden is showing actual, real deterioration. And that's true. He's just too old. And I mean, he's served his country since the 70s. He was a pro-segregationist, actually, in the beginning. And it's just like this guy is, I don't know, it's just funny. It's like running an antique. Rogan had previously said that he would, quote, probably vote for Sanders back in January, noting that the Vermont senator has been, quote, insanely consistent his entire life. Now, that's not true. Bernie Sanders was opposed to open borders. He called it a Koch brothers scheme. He thought it was a right-wing scheme, kind of this ultimate free marketeer's goal. And he opposed open borders, and some on the progressive left were really shocked. And then, of course, he changed his opinion when the political pressure was put on. So that right there is not a true statement. He has not been insanely consistent. I guess if you want to make reference to his ideology and that he has never evolved his opinions despite the evidence of the continuous and constant failures of socialism around the world, yes, he has been consistent there, but there is definitely some glaring inconsistencies in Bernie Sanders' life. And I think it's also exemplified by the fact that he doesn't practice what he preaches. He had 3 houses, and he's sitting there trying to explain that away at the debates, and it's like, yeah, but if we're all going to live as one and share everything, you don't get 3 houses. That's not socialism or communism. That's capitalism. You're very wealthy. That's not socialism or communism. That's capitalism. So I wouldn't call him consistent. I think I know what Joe's trying to say, but it isn't accurate. So we have the quote, when I was hanging out with him as a human being. Isn't that interesting? I believe in him. I like him. I like him a lot. So it really doesn't have to do with an analysis of policy. And I think this is a lot of people's problem with Trump. He reminds them of the football player that pushed them into a trash can in the lunchroom in high school. And they go, I don't like him. And it's like, yeah, but he's going to bat for you now. Like, imagine if the high school quarterback was your best buddy and you were some little scrubby kid, but he's got your back for some reason. I like him. I like him a lot. It's just his feelings. And that's so interesting that the ideology doesn't matter at all. The actual proposals, the policies, none of this matters. And I think it's important to recognize, because this is a fairly standard American approach to politics. How does he make you feel? So Bernie Sanders has this little tweet up where Rogan endorsed him and said, I'll vote for Bernie. He's been insanely consistent. No, he's not. He's basically been saying the same thing, been for the same thing his whole life. I'll give him that, right? That's true. He's been for the same thing, and his viewpoints haven't evolved, despite the fact maybe they should have. And look at this last one, this false gravitas in this statement here. And that, in and of itself, is a very powerful structure to operate from. Think about that sentence. Like, break down, when someone presents you with a statement that's supposed to represent profundity, break it down and think about, what does that mean? And that, in and of itself, is a very powerful structure to operate from. Like a castle. A castle is a powerful structure. So start taking out words that aren't necessary. So he's basically been saying the same thing for his whole life. And this in and of itself doesn't add anything. It's just extra word blabber. I get Joe Rogan's talking live and he's speaking off the cuff. I do it too. So I understand that you're not going to get a perfectly constructed sentence. But when you read it, we can take out in and of itself. He's been saying the same thing his whole life. And that is a very powerful, well, we can take that out, right? That's just more adjectives. So, and that is a structure to operate from. Think of this nonsense sentence here. He's been saying the same thing his whole life, and that is a structure to operate from. It's meaningless. Like, get in a habit of doing this. It's kind of funny once you do. Like, I've been working at the same job for 15 years. Oh, really? Good for you. And that is a structure to operate from. Oh, okay. I guess. Like, I suppose what he's trying to say is that consistency shows confidence. I think what Joe Rogan is saying, or trying to say here, is it shows that he's confident in his beliefs, and I guess confidence is sexy. Women have always told us that. But see the importance in leadership of having confidence. He hasn't been saying the same thing his whole life. He hasn't been insanely consistent, but he's very confident in his wrongness. And that is the leadership. And I think that's why you're seeing Joe Rogan so easily slide from Sanders to Trump. You know, in the political compass, that's going from the lower left, basically controlled anarchy, to the upper right, which is a constitutional Republican form of government. I mean, you couldn't make a bigger swing in 2 weeks or whatever Joe has done here with his political opinion. But in this nonsense statement here, I think the crux of it is, I'm going to vote for Bernie because Bernie shows confidence. So those of you interested in getting in leadership, keep this in mind. The average person, the average American, the average voter, a lot of it is just personality and having confidence. Let's watch this little Bernie Sanders clip here.
Who are you going to vote for in the primary?
I think I'll probably vote for Bernie. Him as a human being, when I was hanging out with him, and
Yeah.
I believe in him. I like him. I like him a lot. What
believe
Bernie
in
stands for is a guy who, well, look, you could dig up dirt on every single human being that's ever existed if you catch them in their worst moment, and you magnify those moments, and you cut out everything else, and you only display those worst moments. That said, you can't find very many with Bernie. He's been insanely consistent his entire life. He's basically been saying the same thing, been for the same thing his whole life. And that, in and of itself, is a very powerful structure to operate from.
Powerful structure. He's got an awesome castle. Okay. So as of April 5th, Biden is on track to win the nomination, securing blah, blah, blah. He's got the delegates. His socialist rival has some that are all going to flip anyway. According to the Washington Post, aides and allies of Sanders have advised him to step down after losing hope in his campaign. Okay. And just to hammer away at this idea I've been discussing, we are making the swing, I think, politically and culturally, from the lower left to the upper right of the political compass. You can see Bernie Sanders right here, right in the center of the lower left-hand column, the socialist column. And then Joe Rogan made the swing all the way. And as I've said, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump here in the upper right should probably be switched. Nobody thinks that Hillary is more right-wing than Trump. But, you know, this is somewhat of a flawed tool, but still it's a decent map. Like, it's not the territory, but it's a decent map. Look at the swing Joe Rogan made here in just a couple weeks. He went from the lower left to the upper right. But what I think the two candidates have in common here is they both represent some sort of structure, you know, to use Joe Rogan's words. They both represent an order. They have a confident belief in what they're doing. And that's what appeals to people. They are voting for order. I've talked about the drug use in Seattle, and we've got just people laying in the streets, and they're giving them needles, and they're giving them food, and they're giving them safe injection sites. And it's not making the problem better, it's just adding to the chaos. And throw the plague into the mix, and now you're just going to have people carrying more than the HIV and the Hep. They're now going to be carrying this other disease and future diseases. And people are begging for a return to some sort of order, some sort of reliable and consistent set of rules. I think if you're just kind of going on your gut, like a Ben and Jerry's kind of like, hey man, can't we all get along? You're going to go for Bernie Sanders. But then Donald Trump also has a very strong vision. But I think it's funny to see just how people can swing. And Joe Rogan, I would say, is an average American. He's not that deep. But I think he is genuine. And he is trying to kind of feel and emote his way to the right decision, which is the wrong way to do it, but that's not uncommon. The fact that he can turn on a dime and embrace the opposite ideology that he was just supporting is kind of indicative of that. But I think that's the swing you're seeing with a lot of Americans are beginning to make, because they're becoming more comfortable with Trump's personality. They're getting more comfortable with him at the helm. In fact, I think more and more people are beginning to feel safe with him as the leader. They're beginning to feel secure. And dare I say, some of them are scratching their head and going, wow, he was right all along about this border thing. And so their confidence in his leadership has grown. And I believe that's why in 2020 he's going to win in a landslide.